Lesson 2, Hive Equipment. There are different kinds of hives, and for the purpose of this lesson we are going to be focusing on the Langstroth hive. It's the one that you are most apt to see in our area. There are boxes stacked one on top of the other, and it is very easy to take care of and is a very common hive. The other two hives that you may hear referred to are the Kenyan top bar hive, and there's a picture of that in the lower left, and the Warre hive, where there's a picture on the bottom right. We won't be talking about them during these lessons except to refer tangentially to them if the subject comes up. The parts of a hive will go in more detail, but let me give an overview of the major parts. When we talk about a hive body, it's the large box that you think of when you think of a beehive. And it holds 10 usually or 8 frames with foundation in the middle, and it is the home that the bees live in. Each hive body or each set of hives has a bottom board. There's an inner cover that goes on top. There's a telescoping cover that sits as the roof. And then, during the honey flow, there are shallower boxes that fit on top of the hive bodies called supers or honey supers. Now, more detail. Here's the hive body, the basic part of the hive. And each colony needs to have 2 hive bodies. They're wooden boxes, and we recommend that you use the ones with 10 frames, or if you want something a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller, they do come with a capacity for only 8 frames. Make up your mind which you want so that you stay consistent and so that all of your equipment can be used interchangeably. Like I said, the 10 frame is standard, but the 8 frame can be easier to handle. The 2 stories that you need to have for every one of your hives allow for the bees to have brood in the bottom box and their honey supplies and stores in the top box. So this is their space. Each hive will have a bottom board, and in our area we strongly recommend that you have one that is a screened bottom board. What that means is that instead of it being a solid base, there is number 8 screening on the bottom board that allows for ventilation, allows for airflow, and is an important part of controlling varroa mites. The number 8 screening is too small for bees to enter or exit through the bottom, but it is just the right size to allow a varroa mite to drop through and they are not able to climb back up. A slot in the frame also allows for a thin sheet of metal to be inserted, and that can be done a couple times during the year and is a way of checking to see if you do have any issues with varroa mites in your hive. Other times of the year it is left out once again because you want to have that airflow and a control for moisture. An entrance restrictor is very important as well. It can be used at different times of the year to provide security for the bees, giving them a defensible entrance to the hive. The piece of wood that fits on the bottom board right in front of and inside the entrance to the hive has different size notches cut in it. The small one you can use when you've just installed your bees and they aren't fully built up to have enough guard bees to defend the hive. That gives them an entrance that's small enough that they can defend from any type of predator or invader. The medium-sized notch is something that you can make available to them when they have built up a bit more able to defend their hive, and it just can actually be removed when the honey flow is on and you don't want the entrance restricted in any way. because the bees are so busy, and by now they have their colony built up to full capacity and are totally able to defend themselves. The inner cover guarantees airspace for ventilation and also provides insulation. It gives a little additional space also for bee movement. And as you can see, especially on the slide to your right, there's an upper entrance cut in that inner cover that allows the bees to access the top part of the hive without having to go in the bottom and up through a variety of hive bodies and supers. The oval also allows for different kind of feeders. We'll go into feeders in more detail in another lesson. It also does allow for what's called a bee escape inserted in that, and if you wish to have your supers collected with fewer bees on them, then the bees are able to go out, but they are not able to come back in through a bee excluder. So once again, it could be a handy tool to have, and this space is definitely a multi-purpose space, providing access for feed, providing insulation and airflow, as well as perhaps providing a space for a bee excluder. The top cover is a telescoping cover, which fits down over the top of the inner cover and overlaps the box that is your top box, be it a hive body or a super. We recommend a telescoping cover because it's more protection from the weather, as well as it's a little more secure. It doesn't get bumped off as easy. You don't have to worry about wind blowing it off, and it's just a safer cover to have and more functional for our environment in this area. The supers are boxes that are used to collect honey. They're shallower than the boxes used for hive bodies. This makes them easier to handle when they're full of honey. Frames are a standard part of every hive body, and they can hold multiple frames. Remember, we talked before about deciding how many frames you wish to have in your hive bodies, and that determines the size of your hive body and your super that you will be getting. Standard is 10 of these frames in each hive, but you can also get them with 8. Just make sure, like I've said before, that you're consistent in the number that you pick. The frames for the hive body are obviously deeper because your hive body is a larger box, while the frames for the super are shallower because your honey supers are not as deep as your hive bodies. The picture here shows a hive body set up for spring. It has 9 frames in it with a feeder. And obviously when the feeder comes out, then your 10th frame will get placed back inside. Foundation is what goes into each one of those frames. And it's the foundation that you put into your frame in order to give the bees a starting point as they build cells to store honey and to lay brood. The bees will use their own wax to pull out the cells. The foundation that you provide can be plastic, wax, or it can even be reinforced with wire. Plastic is more sturdy, and it comes in a variety of colors, from the natural looking ones that are pictured here to black, which does make it very easy to see the egg laying pattern because the egg stands out against the black plastic. Wax is much more natural, and wire provides strength for frames that might be put into a honey extractor. So once again, you have choices, and it really is a personal preference based on what you like to use, what is most comfortable to you, and what you think would be most effective based on what you have planned for your bees and your honey. Another piece of hive equipment that is very handy to have is a queen excluder. Now, queen excluder is a wire grate that allows the worker bees to move between the hive body and supers, but the queen, being larger, is not able to fit through the metal wire. So you can guarantee that your queen will not be laying brood in any of your honey supers, and in fact is staying in the bottom two hive bodies. Many beekeepers don't prefer to use queen excluders because they feel that the worker bees going up and down through that wear their wings even faster than when they're out foraging. So once again, it's a question for you. Do you wish to have one or not? And just be aware that they're there and they can be very handy for someone to ensure that the queen is not up in the honey supers. The pictures on this particular slide show a Langstroth hive put together, and the one on the left gives dimensions. Before we run through it, remember, you need to decide if you want an 8-frame or a 10-frame hive body and supers. So make sure you check the dimensions to make sure that what is given here will create the kind of hive bodies that you wish to have. Let's run through them. So you can see they both have a telescoping top cover that fits down over the inner cover that is placed on top of your honey supers, and they're demonstrating 2 of them here. They both show a queen excluder that is placed between the honey supers and the hive body itself. For their ease of illustrations, they've only included one hive body, or deep super as they call it, but remember, you need to have 2. And then they have bottom board, and in this case, both of them do not show a screened bottom board. And for our area, it's very important to have one that is not solid like these 2, but to have one that is covered with the number 8 screening. The hive on the right-hand side has a stand, which is certainly a fine thing to have, but what is really recommended for our area is that these hives be up off of the ground more than what either of these 2 are showing or demonstrating. We recommend that you put them up on something like cinder blocks or railroad ties or whatever you have handy and that fits in your particular area. Keeping them up off the ground, once again, helps with the moisture retention and the airflow and keeps them easier to maintain so that grass or other vegetation isn't growing up around your hive quite as easily. So in summary, we've been over the various parts of a standard Langstroth hive. We've talked about the fact that you need 2 of the hive bodies, like are pictured here, a screened bottom board, an inner cover, a telescoping cover, an entrance restrictor, a number of supers for your honey collection, and, based on your personal preference, perhaps a queen excluder.